So here we are 10 years later, no legitimate investigation, multiplying layers of disinformation and various conspiracy theories, and the so-called 9/11 debunkers who consistently misrepresent the evidence brought forth by serious investigators. Here's Jim Miegs of Popular Mechanics promoting his new book on Fox News.
How many times did we hear that Building 7 was professionally demolished?
And that was a tough one because that building was not hit by a plane. In the end, it was proven that it was the result of prolonged fires that weakened the internal structure of the building.
And of course, Rosie O'Donnell famously said, with that, it's the first time in history that fire melted steel.
Appendix C of the FEMA report shows one of the only studied pieces of World Trade Center 7 steel and clearly indicates sulfide eutectic formation and intergranular melting, which could not have possibly occurred in a fire. And no experiments have ever been performed which show that it is possible to melt and sulfidate steel in this manner, using fires and drywall gypsum, which contains small amounts of sulfur. Listen as Jim Miegs uses this same fallacious sidestep tactic, which can be found on numerous debunking websites, as well as Michael Shermer's article from Scientific American, all of which completely avoid the evidence that steel actually melted at the World Trade Center, and instead claim that the steel didn't need to melt for the building to collapse and the official story to be.
A lot of people had a hard time understanding how buildings could fall down as a result of fire, but what we found is it doesn't take temperatures high enough to melt steel. It just has to heat up the steel so it expands and then softens and weakens the structure until it collapses.
Okay.
That may be true, but you still didn't explain how the World Trade Center 7 steel from Appendix C of the FEMA report was melted with holes through it like Swiss cheese, for God's sake.
And one of the new things in this particular update that you've got is there are some guys who claim to have collected some air samples, and in that air sample was what?
Some dust. They call it nanothermite. Now, thermite is a compound that if you apply it in a certain way, it can actually melt metal in certain conditions. And they're claiming they've given up on the idea there were bombs in the building. That was the original claim. Now they're saying, oh, there was some kind of nanothermite. And of course, you talk to demolition experts, the whole idea is ridiculous.
Interesting. Popular Mechanics is now claiming that it is ridiculous to think that thermite could be used to demolish a steel structure. Yet in the November 1935 issue of Popular Mechanics, it describes how the Skyride Tower in Chicago was demolished in that very same manner, by engineers using thermite to melt through the vertical steel columns and collapse the structure. Pretty ridiculous, eh?
But what it shows is how the conspiracy theories keep evolving as one gets knocked down. They never change their conclusions. They just come up with new evidence.
That's probably because there's so much evidence, which we will continue to compile and make public until the truth is known and the perpetrators are brought to justice.
Now they're literally claiming their best evidence is grains of dust found in the street near the ground.
As if the size of the evidence has anything to do with how important it is. DNA is even smaller than the nanothermite particles which can be found uniformly throughout samples of World Trade Center dust. Yet DNA is used routinely to convict criminals in court cases all over the world. Just like the nanothermite evidence from the World Trade Center dust will someday convict the 9/11 criminals.